I have an important question for you, and this is hard-hitting. This is the type of stuff that everybody wants to know, and it's an important question. Is Dexter Fowler the greatest leadoff man in Chicago Cubs history? Is Dex the best for what he did for 2 seasons?
Yes.
We put the poll out. We got some names out there. You think he is?
I think I'd say he is. I mean, I know there's a few other guys in that poll. We had a few other names. Rizzo, everyone likes to talk about Rizzo, which he actually did well in most of his leadoff roles. He wasn't a leadoff hitter, but when he did hit leadoff, he hit pretty well. Soriano's first couple years with the Cubs leading off actually had really, really good numbers.
A lot of boom, too.
They obviously didn't win the World Series, but he had great numbers, and obviously the home run totals. He had the power. Like he had great numbers first couple years leading off. I think he gives Fowler a run at his money.
He strikes out a lot. Soriano would have been a spectacular leadoff man for the Cubs had he not ripped the quad off the bone, right? Like
he was a 40-40 guy.
If he doesn't have the injury, he's still stealing bases with the Cubs. He's hitting home runs. He's everything they wanted when they signed him. So I could see Soriano being on the list. Dexter Fowler, OBP in 2016 was 393. Now, you guys aren't old enough to remember Bobby Dernier, but for that Cubs era, that was the daily double. It wasn't just Sandberg. It was Dernier to Sandberg. Dernier setting the table for Ryan Sandberg to drive him in and become the MVP and a future Hall of Famer. So Bob Dernier, 356 OBP, but he only struck out 60 times in 1984. So he wasn't a guy that would strike out. And I thought the one thing that was crazy that actually flashed through my mind as I was sitting there and watching Dex hit that home run in Cleveland in Game 7 of the World Series, my mind flashed back to being a little kid and watching the 84 playoffs against the Padres. Bob Dernier led off that postseason with a home run against the Padres. They won 13-0, I think, Game 1. We just forget it after that. With the rest of it, we don't remember. But I do remember Bob Dernier, who was not a guy with home run power, hit a home run, and you were like, it was the same thing as Game 7. You were nervous going into it as a fan. He hits the home run, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh, this might happen. This could happen. I feel so much better. I can enjoy it. So for a generation of Cub fans, Bob Dernier, who does show up a lot at Cubs convention and different signing things, has to be on the list.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a comment in the chat, Kenny Lofton for half a season. I know you and I were talking about that. I mean, I don't know that he would get there in the top in such a long organization for I'm looking at it was 56 games. He was worth 2.1 wins above replacement in 56 games for the Cubs in 2003, and he was 36 years old. That's
one of the greatest trades.
Really kind of remarkable.
Yeah, he was a fun player.
But
Aramis in that trade.
Yeah. This is one where I'm sure, and the chat, and we're talking about some of the guys that are certainly before my time. But I would say Dexter. You can compare the numbers as far as their overall production. I'm sure some guys certainly did it for longer, et cetera. But it's everything we talked about today. Like, Dexter was so good and valuable and just perfect in the most important season in Cubs history. Like, I think that earns him the title. Yeah. Like, we can't defer everything to the year that they won the World Series, right? Like, every best or most important is just in 2016. But I think, like, if we're talking about the value of a leadoff hitter, like a true leadoff hitter and what their job is and what they're brought in to do, he did it as well as you possibly could. And it was so utterly important to them winning their first World Series in 108 years. Like, I don't know how you would have any other answer.
And if you don't count the length of time that a guy was doing it, right? Like, it's more about their impact while they were the leadoff guy. So that brings you to a name like Anthony Rizzo. The numbers don't lie. Like, Rizzo would always like to proclaim himself, although he wasn't leadoff very much. But, Madden liked to use different guys. Chris Bryant, I specifically remember a Chris Bryant leadoff game where he had like 3 hits and doing an end-of-game interview with him and asking him, so are you better than Rizzo? And he's like, no, Riz is still. But Rizzo, statistically, is he the best leadoff guy? in Cubs history? I don't know. You're the numbers guys. I don't.
Me, I'm not a numbers guy.
Delmetrics
guy.
Yeah, it's rated in vibes.
I wouldn't say he is just because he wasn't a leadoff hitter. Like he had his stretches where he was hitting leadoff, but he wasn't.
Really.
He wasn't a leadoff hitter in the sense of like Dexter Fowler. Like,
well, I mean, if we are going by the Delmetrics, Rizzo is not only the best leadoff hitter in Chicago Cubs history, he's also the best relief pitcher in Chicago Cubs history. If we're looking at his sparkling ERA, so depends how you want to. If we're going strictly by the numbers, the answer is Anthony Rizzo for a lot of categories.
Right.
So he has a better ERA than anybody. Yeah. So
you mentioned Stan Hack here and Notion. Yeah, I mean, obviously none of us watched him. Even you didn't watch him, Luke. No. So I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that was uncalled for. Yeah, that was totally uncalled for. Even you, 30s and 40s.
Oh man,
come on now.
So rude.
Hey man, like I'm just.
Hey, all I know is I looked him up and he led the Cubs to 4 World Series. They lost all 4 of them, but he led the Cubs to 4 World Series and his OBP was almost 400.
It's pretty solid.